in the evening, and it's kind of packed room, and the only seat that's available is in the middle of the room.
Mhm.
This actually becomes a pretty important part of the story because I grab a seat. 3 minutes in, I learn what open house for a marketing company actually is. It was
Okay.
actually a recruiting meeting for a multi-level marketing organization.
Oh, wow. Oh, geez.
So you
Okay.
can do the math. Okay, open house for a
Yeah,
market. Okay, I
I
get
got
it now.
you. Because I
And
was literally racking my brain going, I've
yeah,
never heard of it.
you can ignore personality. There's no correlation there. You can ignore these natural abilities, but you're measuring 8 areas of leadership. And just think about a pizza. If you cut a
Mhm,
pizza, normally round pizza,
mhm.
you have 8 equal slices. We didn't even realize the assumption that we were making is that all 8 of those aspects of leadership were equally important
Wow.
to happen. But we had just launched out, and about a year in, our primary client said, "Gosh, you do great work, and it's been a good run." It's like, hey, we've had Tim for a while, and we're good. We're good. Good luck to you. There's non-business cases to make,
Mhm.
and I'm talking about how it's going to impact his leadership. And I just said, look, it's just a better way to lead. And he said to me, it's not just a better way to lead; it's a better way to live.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I will give you attribution, but I am putting that in the I'm putting that in the book.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Tim Spiker, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about this amazing book that you wrote on leadership, about how important it is that it's about who leaders are, right? And we need to work on who we are as leaders to be more effective. I love that, man. I just love it. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to visit with you and everybody that's watching and listening.
So where were you born?
Well, I was born in McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but the lion's share of my childhood was in Morgantown, West Virginia, just
Yeah.
classic American college town.
Yeah, I love that. What was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Well, you know, I'm so blessed, to have 2 supportive parents who stayed together and I think about my folks and all that they've given me in life, and there'd be just no way to ever repay that.
Yeah.
If one of the most things that rings in my head the most that I hear from my parents is that we're proud of you. And I'm 53 and that doesn't get old. And so I got a lot of that growing up, so I know that that's not everybody's story. I know that I'm blessed to have that be part of my story. But in the midst of all of that kind of supportive home environment, my father was the athletic trainer for the football team at West Virginia University. And
Ooh,
yeah,
how cool.
there's no professional sports in West Virginia.
Yeah.
So, and football is the top sport at the state's top university. So
Yeah, it is.
I got a chance to be in and around Division I college athletics my entire childhood. I once fell into a whirlpool in the training room and had to be fished out when I was 6 years old. So thankfully they made it to me. But that exposure, it did a lot of things. It kind of gave you a vision of something bigger. It wasn't just my neighborhood. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there was this thing that a lot of people were interested in that I got a chance to be behind the scenes a lot and just to see a little bit of how it worked. And certainly in my life, that ignited a spark towards athletics that has, permeated not only my life, but, my brother is a college basketball coach. He's the head coach at Drexel in Philadelphia. And so there are things that come out of that world of athletics that's really special that I still hold on to today.
That's cool. Growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Well, for sure, my parents,
Yeah.
for sure, and in different ways.
Yeah.
My dad is super steady, just solid and steady. My mom would probably be the more emotive and passionate one. Not that he's not passionate, but he does it a little bit differently. And so I would say most of the things in life where I'm excited about who I have become, I got from my mom. Most of the things in life I am trying to still get to are the things that my dad modeled.
That's cool.
And so that combination from the two of them certainly most influential.
That's awesome. In high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I mean, I probably knew from my freshman year that I was going to study engineering. So all of the math and all of the science, not so much chemistry, but the rest of it, yeah. I still remember physics in high school and being really interested in all the little experiments. So mostly a math and science kid, a little computer science thrown in there as well.
Favorite teacher in high school?
Oh, Jim Field.
Oh, yeah?
Jim Field, no question.
Hands
Jim.
down, huh?
Yeah, and he was a civics teacher, as I recall. I mean, old enough now. I'm trying to remember what were those classes. The thing that was so incredible about Jim Field, and thankfully, I'm not only telling you and the audience, I've told him this as well. But he was the first teacher that I ever had that convinced me and all of my classmates that we had something that other people should hear. He essentially kind of gave you that voice and gave space for your ideas and encouraged you to share them. And I don't remember any detail of anything that I learned in Mr. Field's class, but I learned that, and especially given what I do today, I can't think of anything more valuable than somebody telling you, "Hey, your ideas are valuable.
Yeah.
Your ideas are worth sharing. Let's talk about them." So in high school, there were other good ones certainly, but Jim Field is at the top of my list.
Isn't that amazing how a teacher can just grab you
Oh,
and
it's
just, I mean,
astounding.
it's incredible. Absolutely
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah,
But your whole life can turn,
that's true.
it's that influence is amazing.
That's true.
So after high school, where do you go?
Well, I was not willing to make a choice between athletics and academics.
Yeah.
And I was, on the border from an athletic standpoint. And so I didn't go to college immediately out of high school. I went and did what's called a postgraduate year at a prep school in New England.
Okay.
And that's a long time ago, which is to say most of my teammates were working on their SAT scores so that they would be eligible to compete their freshman year in college. This is all basketball, by the way.
Yeah.
I was okay on that front, on the SAT front. That was okay, but I was working to be, bigger, stronger, try to get better as a basketball player, so that I would not be making choices between engineering schools and basketball.
Yeah.
I wanted both of those things, and so that's what so I had a really, really unique year where everybody else is going off to college, and I'm essentially going off to boarding school. So right when you think
Voluntarily.
yes, right, exactly. Yeah, and we did look at some military ones as well. So
Wow.
but you're leaving home, and your mind thinks more freedom. And I can tell you, this where I was way more strict than my house ever was. And my parents were they were super tight down on things. But man, that was an awakening. But it was a really shaping year. It was Brewster Academy in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. And it stretched me. It was a tough year, but it was good for me as well.
So where do you go after that?
Well, I went to Purdue University. And
Okay, you're a Boilermaker.
I am a Boilermaker.
Love that.
And, is fortunate enough to kind of make the basketball team there as a walk-on. And that was a whole getting to play for Gene Katie and play with Glenn Robinson, play with Matt Painter, who's now the head coach at Purdue. All of that sticks with you forever. this will be when this airs, but we have Matt going on our podcast this later this week, so we get a chance to hear his perspective. But getting a chance just to be around excellence and people that will, again, back to the stretching. I mean, I was, athletically, we'll just all have to smile.
Yeah.
It's like, bless his heart. I'm in the South, so we can say that. But the reality is, I played 27 minutes in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
A basketball game is 40 minutes long, so everybody
Yeah.
can do the math there.
Right.
But it was such a shaping experience,
Yeah.
and I'm so thankful for it. But eventually, I decided that I wanted to make sure that I was making as much contribution as possible. So I ended up transferring and then finishing playing at a Division III school, Washington University in St. Louis, for my last 2 years. And it was like I got one college degree, but two wildly different experiences.
Yeah.
From the Big Ten to Division III, from having a good seat for every game to playing lots in every. I played more in one game at WashU than I did my whole career at Purdue.
Yeah.
Yeah, but both places had excellence. Both were stretching in different ways. I got to play for two incredible coaches in Gene Cady and Mark Edwards, both of whom I'm friends with today. So I feel, and this just gets back to the theme, Mike.
Yeah.
I feel like at every step, blessed, and I hope that I can be a good steward of all of those things that were blessings to me as I was growing up.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you graduate from Washington University.
Yep.
Where do you go from there?
I worked in the world of finance just for a little bit, kind of got exposed to that, and it was interesting, but then turned around and as quickly as I could, went back to grad school and got an MBA. And it was right as I was getting ready to start my MBA that I had this moment. I don't know of a better way to describe it. I did not see it coming. I had not been dabbling around the edges, but it was just a moment one night that is really it's the catalytic thing that causes you and I to be talking today. And I can look back. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was waiting tables, which by the way, let me just say, my kids probably aren't going to hear this, but if they do, they know, like, I think everybody should wait tables.
Yeah.
It's just teaches you so much about interacting with people, serving people, trying to keep an order straight in your head when you're on a double shift, all those kinds of things. But I was waiting tables and I got invited to an open house for a marketing company.
Okay.
By one of my fellow servers. And I was going to study marketing in graduate school. That sounded interesting. I was absolutely certain there would be a free meal involved, and that was very important. And so I said yes. So I get to this office building in the evening, and it's kind of packed room, and the only seat that's available is in the middle of the room. This actually becomes a pretty important part of the story because I grab a seat. 3 minutes in, I learn what open house for a marketing company actually is. It was actually a recruiting meeting for a multi-level marketing organization.
Oh, wow. Oh, geez.
So
okay.
you can do the math. Okay, open house for market. Okay, I get it.
Because I was literally racking my brain going, I've never heard of an open house.
Well.
Okay, now I get it.
Now it all comes together.
Now I get it, yeah.
I don't have any things against
we call that repurposing.
Yes. Speaking of marketing, even the presentation of that was crafty marketing. Crafty marketing, by the way, is the nicest way I can describe that. At times,
it's a polite way.
At times, I've called it the best lie that I've ever been told because of what happened afterwards, and it wasn't because I joined. I don't have a problem with MLMs. I know a lot of people have had some good experiences, but I did not want to sell water purifiers to my family and friends.
Gotcha.
And that's what they wanted me to do. So I sat. Now, remember, I'm trapped in the middle of this room.
Right.
I can't just shimmy my way out without making a scene. And so I had a choice. Am I going to make a scene, or am I going to hang in here until the break and then grab a sandwich and get out?
Hit it, right?
And I decided to wait. And I'm so thankful for that decision because they started to talk about what does it mean to be an employee. And I remember there was a door open to the back of the room. It was as if the dark cloud of doom and gloom entered when we began to talk about what does it mean to be an employee. And that was the moment for me. I checked out. I didn't hear another thing in that presentation. The guy up front became like Charlie Brown's teacher. He's just going on I am here. Yeah,
Yeah.
just wah, wah, wah.
Right.
And I'm sitting in that chair. It's like everybody in this room is here and I'm not. I am totally somewhere else because I just was sitting there thinking, why is it that way?
Yeah.
I mean, if I work for you and somebody said, what's it like to work for Mike Litton?
Mhm.
How come the answer is it's the most amazing blessing that I could never have imagined. I can't believe how much we're achieving. I can't believe how much we're growing. I can't believe how much I'm growing. I can't even believe how it's affecting my family at home that I'm getting to follow Mike.
Mm.
Why isn't that the answer?
Yeah.
And so that's what I sat there in that room thinking about as everybody else was talking about the horribleness of following another person, the horribleness of being led. So at the break, I did leave.
Did you
Got my
grab a sandwich?
grab sandwich, of course.
Brother, you gotta eat. Come
I
on
showed
now.
up. Yeah, I showed up. So, but I remember. I mean, it's almost like yesterday. Like I remember walking to my car, and I just started thinking, who do I have access to? Who could I talk to? And I had some to say fledgling thoughts about leadership would be to give me too much credit. Like I kind of knew how to spell the word, but
Mhm.
I hadn't consciously thought about it much. But I had in my mind about who I could start to call. And I just started calling on people and said, hey, would you visit with me about leadership? And this is amazing. I didn't get a single no,
Yeah.
not one single no. People were so generous with their time. And at the end of every conversation, I would just say the same thing. Who else should I talk to?
Mhm.
And they would give me 3 names. And then, I'd call up Sally and I said, hey, Sally, you don't know me, but Mike said I should give you, oh, yeah, Mike. Yeah, Mike's great. And then, whether it was a week later or 2 months later or whatever it was, Sally would have an hour and we would spend time together. One of the most amazing parts of this story is the first guy I called is a guy who runs camps for kids named Joe White. And I drove to Branson, Missouri to visit with Joe.
Mhm.
And I asked him for an hour, which is kind of normally, he gave me 8. I spent the whole day with Joe.
Wow.
And he was like the picture of generosity right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And so that just snowballed for a couple of years and led me into a leadership consulting position with a firm. I would say much earlier in life than I thought I would ever have the opportunity. As I grew in my passion around this, I had this plan like, okay, by the time I'm 45, I think I might have enough knowledge and experience. And I didn't know what would 32 to 45 look like?
Mhm.
Well, somebody stepped in at about 32 and said, hey, why don't you join our practice? And I was like, whoa, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So very thankful for that. That led to some research that we're going to talk about because that's the basis of the book. So I'm sure we're
Right.
going to dig into that.
Right.
That research, clients, eventually went out on my own to start a company so I could talk specifically about that research. And for the last 12 years, that's what I've been doing. So I am so thankful that I was invited to the open house for the
Yeah.
marketing company because it really flipped a switch in me that I didn't even know that I had, and that switch has stayed on ever since.
So we're thankful. Just honestly, we're thankful that you went, right? Because what you ended up delivering to us is something that's incredibly important. And I want to make sure that people understand how vital this is. I've been in leadership. I owned one of the largest real estate offices in California, North America, that kind of thing, for 18 years. And I learned a ton about real estate or a ton about real estate, but a ton about leadership. And the thing that I learned the most about leadership is it really is about who you are. It
Yeah,
really is about who that leader is, right? It
yeah,
also comes down to being that leader and being who you are. You need to be able to effectively communicate. And I'm writing a book right now on
oh
the
yeah,
power of questions.
oh
And the
wow,
idea behind it is we interviewed an amazing woman probably 2 months ago now on the podcast. And I call her the CEO whisperer. And she worked for the CEO of Whataburger for 25 years.
oh wow,
And she talks about in terms of what to do, right? She talks about he would schedule appointments, meetings, and he would sit with people that were 2 and 3 levels below him. I mean, not even direct reports, right? He met with direct reports too, but he'd meet with people that were 2 and 3, and he would sit down with them and say, how are we doing as a company?
Mm.
How are we doing in terms of helping you get to where you want to be? By the way, where do you want to be? Right. And he would go through all this with them. Okay. And are we on track getting you to where you want to be? And he would write down notes about what it was that they were telling him.
Mm.
That is so unbelievably important when you're a leader, that you write notes in front of the people that work with you. Okay. Because it validates them. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And so he would sit down with them and he'd just ask them questions, and he wouldn't talk about himself. He wouldn't talk about the company. He wouldn't talk about anything except that employee. And it really, honestly, Tim, it really does come down to who you are and what you're all about. Right. And then being able to effectively communicate that. And that's
Yeah.
why you and I were introduced by Scott Mann. And that's why I'm a huge Scott Mann fan, right? Scott Mann
Yeah.
fan. Well, that was
Yeah.
good.
That's
That was
it.
good.
We're
Right.
gonna start the club.
We're,
And that's
we're
what we're gonna
trademarking
do.
that, baby, right? But
Scott Mann
we're
Fan Club.
fans of Scott because Scott's an effective communicator, right? He used to go in
Put it
behind,
mildly.
drop it.
Put it
Yeah, he
mildly.
would drop in as a Green Beret behind enemy lines, and that man would have a few minutes, maybe,
Yeah.
right? Maybe,
Mhm.
before they plugged him, before they got rid of him, right? He would land and he'd be in there going, okay, I got to figure something out. I got to connect like my life depends on it, like he
Yeah.
likes to say, right? And he teaches. I mean, it's a big deal. And
Yeah.
so that's why I feel like what you're writing about and what your book says and the message that you're delivering, the wisdom that you're delivering, is just incredibly important. And it's a big, big deal. We have, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this, but we have a real massive void when it comes to effective leadership and what people consider to be effective leadership, right?
Yes.
A lot of these companies have retention problems. If you have retention problems and performance problems in your company, you've got to look at the leader,
Yeah.
honestly,
No,
right?
I mean, yes, I fully agree with that.
Scott tells this story in his book about Nobody's Coming to Save You, by the way. He talks about this. He tells this story in the book where he was hired by this large company, and the CEO, he was standing off stage, and the CEO said, I'm going to introduce Scott, our speaker, in a minute, but I have a slide deck here that's talking about how we did this year as a company. He goes, I just want to go through this real quick. And so he starts in. Scott paid attention to what was happening in the audience, and nearly all of them were on their phone within seconds.
Hmm.
Within seconds. Okay. He talks about a thing in his book called the churn, and it's a real thing. He's really onto something that's real. Okay. The thing is, what I believe that CEO could have done instead of what he did was say, look, I'm going to introduce Scott here in just a minute. I've got a slide deck here that talks about how we're doing as a company. You're on the firing lines. You're the people that are making us successful every day. How do you think we're doing as a company?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think this slide deck's going to say? Anybody want to take a guess?
Hey, there's your questions going. Yeah.
Anybody want to take a guess? Right?
That's right.
Now they're engaged, Tim. Now they're engaged. Okay. And it's all about who you are as a leader. If you're an effective leader and you're the right type of person that you talk about in your book, you're going to ask questions. You're going to be curious and you're going to go there. Okay. What stands in the way of a lot of non-effective leaders who are not who you want to be following is they don't have the self-esteem and the security, the personal security to actually ask and go there. They're afraid of what they're going to hear, right? Or they don't want to be bothered. Okay. And that's the worst possible outcome, right? So that's why I feel like what you're doing and the wisdom you're sharing with us is so unbelievably important. I'm so glad you went to that meeting. I can't even tell you.
Well, I had no idea what was in front of me, certainly, and didn't. And
so what company did you join at 32?
It's called FMI.
Okay.
And it's a management consulting firm that's focused in the construction industry.
Okay.
And so I didn't come to it with any construction experience, but my kind of leadership thinking and efforts are why they ultimately hired me. And then very early on, I got put in part of an internal project to really begin to clarify and codify what it was that our various consultants were doing with our clients around the issue of leadership.
Gotcha.
Eventually, we ended up running a little leadership project out of that initial investigation, and that's when the shocking data showed up,
Yeah.
and that's what got up, and that's when really things started to shift for me in terms of the direction that I was going to go.
So you made a decision to write this book, and there are people that are listening to this that are thinking about writing a book,
Yeah.
but they haven't done it. Okay. Talk about the mindset and the thought process that went into this. I know we have to be a little insane. There has to be a little bit of insanity,
Yeah,
right?
I'm laughing because I'm always prepared to talk about the research and the data and all the
Yeah.
leadership related things.
Yeah.
But this is a different question.
Yeah, it is. It is.
The writing of a book.
I told you we weren't like anybody
Yeah,
else.
you're right. This is it's good. It's good. I enjoy it. So I've heard it been said, as perhaps many have, that there are two kinds of authors: those that like to write and those that like to have written.
Mhm.
I'm definitely in the latter group.
Right.
Like, keep in mind, let's go back. I am an engineer by education.
Yeah.
Now, I tell everybody without hesitation, the world is a safer place because I'm not a practicing engineer. That's
Yeah.
true. I've got classmates. You should listen to them on the engineering side, not me. But that engineering background meant that I visited the library 3 times in my entire collegiate career.
Right.
I didn't spend a lot of time in English class. I
Yeah.
didn't spend a lot of time. I wasn't writing papers. I was
Right.
doing math problems. And so I'm probably the least likely person on the planet to write a book.
Mhm.
But the reason that I did it is because, at least in my story, I couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
Once I saw this research, I just was dying on the inside to share what it was saying. And that's even years later, because when we first saw the numbers, I didn't really totally understand what was going on. I
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, this seems important, but I don't know that I fully understand it. But over time, this passion for sharing, and I would have 1 to 2 hour conversations with individuals, as we were talking before we started recording, very similar to your experience of getting into radio.
Mhm.
I'm having these conversations that feel wildly important
Yeah.
in general and with the person that I'm with, but this is not scaling. This is not
Mhm.
multiplying. And I want to help more. I want to share this with more people because
Mm.
the feedback I'm getting is that it's helpful.
Yeah.
So you go into radio, I write a book, because if I write a book, and I've found that it's been totally true that, I now get to have, multi-hour conversations with people about things that I think are really important and that they have an interest in without me even being in the room.
Yeah.
And what's amazing then is that, especially when we have that situation with clients, we get to start from there, not starting we get to launch off of them already having engaged that and thinking about it. And that's a lot of fun as well. So it was a passion project, but not because I liked writing.
Yeah.
It was a passion project because I had to get it out. I had to get it down. I've got to get this in the hands of other people. And it was never about, it was never about financial aspects to that. I mean, it still isn't about that. It doesn't work that way, really. But boy, is it exciting. I feel honored every time somebody reads the book. Every time one person reads the book, I feel like that person has helped me fulfill part of my mission vocationally, because they've engaged with this idea over the course of a couple hundred pages. And so I'm very thankful. But your question is, what's the process? I don't know. I'll quote Will Ferrell from Old School. I don't know. I think I blacked out right there. I don't know what happened. That's I mean, I
blacked out. I woke up and I was an author.
Yes. I don't know what happened. You're my boy, Blue. So I think I wrote 80% of it in 2 months.
Wow.
And this is a story. I think this part of it, what created that space, is a story that maybe a lot of people have. But I had gone out on my own because I wanted to speak freely. There were always little governors around what I was talking about, and I just was tired of it.
Yeah.
And now it was tough because my wife is not entrepreneurial in nature.
Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com. And it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off.
So I'm, having to say, hey, we're going to give it a go. Actually, what we did is we drew a line in the checking account.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we didn't have to talk about money every day. We just said, as long as the bank account's north of that amount, the dream is still alive.
There you go.
And if it drops below,
that's a great way to do it.
Well, I mean, we were probably desperate, just trying to figure out how I wasn't having to report what the account balance was every night. It was like, that's not going to help us any.
No kidding.
But thankfully, we've been able to stay above the Mendoza line there and able to keep going. And it did save us a lot of difficult conversation, but it wasn't kind of in her DNA for that. So blessings to her, because she gets to experience the anxiety of, I mean, you're on a roller coaster, which is very apropos because you have no control. Whereas I at least had some impact on what was going to happen, even if I didn't know what was going to happen. But we had just launched out, and about a year in, our primary client said, gosh, you do great work, and it's been a good run. It's like, hey, we've had Tim for a while, and we're good. Good luck to you.
Wow.
And it was 98% of our income.
Oh my gosh.
So immediately my entire schedule is cleared.
Yeah.
And then the next 2 months is when I wrote most of the book.
Wow.
So we look at these things and we think, oh no, the sky is falling. What am I going to do? What could happen next? And I'm so thankful that they had enough of Tim. I'm so thankful that they said, we're good for now. And they opened up my calendar. And while 80% of it got written in 2 months, I started using it as a PDF with clients, and it didn't become in book form for 5 years.
Wow.
I mean, frankly, we just got busy with client work, people who really connected with I'd look at that initial manuscript now and I'd probably shudder, like, yikes, that's not very good. But what happened is it was good enough to get us going.
Yeah.
And I'm just sharing PDFs. And I still remember the first time I ever walked into a room and people had the PDF printed out sitting on the table. And I had to like manage myself. I was like, whoa, that look, and they took notes. Look, there's little stickies in there.
How did that feel?
I really had to like not tear up. Like I had to focus.
Yeah.
And this was a company down in Australia. I knew the president of the company, and I had sent him a copy of the manuscript saying, give me some critical feedback. And he was absolutely useless because he didn't give me any critical feedback. But 2 months later, he said, hey, I want you to come talk to my executive team for an afternoon.
Wow.
And I remember getting on the airplane to go to Sydney, feeling like I had just gotten, called up from AAA, and I was going to be starting for the Yankees on Friday night. Because this is
in the show.
This is a publicly traded ASX 100 company in Australia.
Wow.
But, so I walk in the room or in the boardroom, and everybody's got these manuscripts out. And here's what's really funny about it. I had never printed it out. I had only looked at it on my computer.
Oh my goodness gracious. So now you're looking at it on paper for the first time. And it's on their desk in front of them.
It's on the table.
Wow. Yeah. What a story. I love this.
It was a crazy moment. So I kind of bit my lower lip a little bit. I'm like, and it wasn't like pride and I was all excited or anything. I don't even know if I could describe the emotion except that it was emotional.
Wow.
Maybe just because you just put your heart and soul into something, and then you see it sitting there. So
it's your life's work, right? I mean, this is decades in the making.
That's true. Yeah,
right.
That's true.
And it's your passion. It's like you had that moment at that meeting, and then everything just basically took on a life of its own from there. Yeah. And it's, I mean, dude, I can totally get how you would feel incredibly emotional,
Yeah.
So how did that presentation go?
It's so funny because it took me back to my athletic days, frankly, which is you're really, really nervous. And then you get into it and you're, oh, wait, I've done this a million times.
Yeah.
I've done this a million times. So first 10 minutes, I was pretty sure, like, can the guy next to me, can he hear my heart beating? He can probably hear my heart. But we started to dig into the conversations about leadership that I had been in forever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize, yeah, I might be on the other side of the planet, but these are people
Yeah.
just like I am, and we're having a conversation. All of those times when I didn't have the book, all of those conversations made me ready for this conversation.
Yeah.
And so
That's so
it's
cool.
after about 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, I mean, lots of times in basketball, you'd get this thing where the first 5 minutes,
You got the yips.
you're hyperventilating,
Yeah.
you got cotton mouth, and
Yeah.
you're not out of shape. You're not like, I'm in the best shape I've ever been in my life. What is happening?
Yeah.
There's that hump. You just got to push through. And
Mhm.
once you get over it, it's basketball and you're good. Man, there's a couple of minutes there. Didn't happen every game, but it happened a number of games where
Mhm.
you're just like, I can barely breathe. And once you get through that, then you're good. And we
Yeah.
had a great conversation for 4 hours that afternoon. And I walked into the CEO's office afterwards, Mike Kane, incredible human being, incredible leader. And I walked into his office and he said, well, that went better than I thought it would. And I'm like,
What?
I'm not sure how to take that comment,
Yeah,
Mike.
no kidding, right?
And of course we had a big chuckle about that. And he was just very, I think he had expectations, but I think it just kind of engaged maybe them a little bit more than he was anticipating.
Oh, wow.
And the other thing that happened is I didn't want to go down there, plop in for 4 hours, be home in a week, and not have created anything more for them. So it was my desire, especially considering the content, was I'd created about a 3-month experience for them to use as this was a launching part. And then they would go into this 3 months and execute on this. I mean, they didn't have to, I suppose, but Mike wanted them to, so they had to.
That's cool.
And so there was some follow on for them to do. But my story has so many moments back to the blessed all over the place. One of the leaders of one of their divisions was not able to make that meeting. It happened to be North America, and it happened to be in Atlanta, which is where I lived at the time. And so Mike said, would you go over and do with the Atlanta team what you did with the global leadership team in Sydney? And I said, sure. And we started joking around on email about how much I would charge him for that. And so by the way, that line in the checking account was getting closer.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I can see it now. That's close.
We're so close to the Mendoza line, man.
We're getting too
right. Yeah.
And that conversation, Mike said, well, I'm thinking maybe you should work with our leadership teams around the globe. I remember being in my kitchen and looking at that email. I'm standing next to my wife, and we're like very early on in a business that doesn't have a lot of clients.
Right.
And I looked at it and I looked at her, I'm like, he's serious.
Wow.
Like this is actually real. And to even go one step further with oh my goodness, I later on got an email from their head of HR, who has since become a friend, Linda, and her agreement with us was 2 years. And Mike and I had only talked about 1 year.
Yeah.
And so I just wrote Mike back and I said, hey, just wanted to clarify. We had talked about a year. Linda sent me 2 years. What are your thoughts? Not kidding. The email he wrote back is whatever you want. I'm like, so I tried to come up with a reason why 2 years would be a bad idea, but I couldn't come up with one.
Right. Not after looking at the bank account.
No, like I looked at the bank account. I think it's 2.
Yeah.
I think it's 2. But here's what's amazing about that. Sitting here talking with you now.
Yeah.
Like it's a funny moment to look back on. It was an enormous moment in our young family, and you're trying to figure out how this is going to work or if it's going to work. And he says 2. And in the reality, that had a huge impact even today into how I approach the work, because when he said 2, it completely changed how I structured. If he'd said 1, I would have been very tempted to take 12 pounds of sugar and put it into a 5-pound bag.
Yeah.
And I think our work would have been less effective. But because he opened it up to further, then I didn't feel the need to move everything into a tight space. And it actually, that offer from him has influenced. Now, there are things now today, if somebody says, will you do this in this short period of time? I'll just say no. And it's not because we're financially stable. It's because it won't work. like we need time in the saddle.
Yeah.
And I would rather do smaller number of things for longer periods of time than do
Yeah.
short bursts, because we have seen that create more value. So that thing that, again, all the things, Mike, that I couldn't orchestrate.
Yeah.
I could not have orchestrated his response on that. I was not involved.
Yeah.
Guy went from 1 to 2 years and totally changed how our business even operates today. So many of those little things along the way. And once we got a chance to work, I mean, it's like you're the dog that caught the car.
Yeah.
Like I'm going from Asia to Australia, back to North America. I think we had, I counted the other day, like 36 trips overseas in 4.5 years. And it was all usually about a week at a time.
Mhm.
But the experience and the clients and their willingness to dig in, and I mean, we have, of course, clients who dig in and apply. You learn so much from them, and it's incalculable, really.
So you met Michael King.
Yeah.
You met him by sending him your transcript to get his thoughts?
He was working at the consulting firm when I was.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I had worked for him for a very short season there, but we had built a really great relationship that was going to continue on well after that. And so he was one of the folks I sent the transcript to get some feedback on, just because
Gotcha.
plus he knew the whole story of the research already, because he had been at the firm when it happened. So he was well aware of the story, and he was a believer. He was bought in to where this research pointed. And so then I got a chance, and that opportunity grew and blossomed, and eventually sunsetted. But now you've got momentum. You've got more people read the book. You've got more people calling. You've got more people, and our business has continued on, and we'll be, about 12 years in here later on this year. So so many things that I couldn't have orchestrated, that I'm so very thankful for.
So what you've mentioned the research a couple of times. Talk about what it was that you discovered. Talk about what the research says.
So here we go into the teeth of this whole thing.
That's right. Buckle in and keep your arms inside the ride at all times.
That's right. Here we go. We had a hypothesis at the firm. We were bringing people up to the west side of Pikes Peak for a week at a time to go through a series of leadership development experiences. At the very start of that, we were measuring, we did some assessments. And so personality, natural ability, and a leadership 360. So people were getting, feedback from 360 degrees around them on a variety of leadership categories. Now, I should clarify, when I say natural abilities, I'm not talking about natural leadership abilities. That assessment would look at things like if you were to put on the screen here 15 numbers, and you'd give us 10 seconds to look at them, and then you take them down and you say, write down as many as you can remember in order. Some people could write 12 numbers. Other people would only get the 3 if the first 3 match their area code. So that's, and you've got that's the kind of strange natural abilities that were measured. And so that was one of the assessments, personality and leadership. And so we had a hypothesis that there might be some aspects of personality plus natural ability that make you more likely to be a better leader. And so we are going to take these 2 assessments, put them against the third assessment, and see if there's a statistical correlation. And so that was our initial effort. That was our initial hypothesis. And my research colleague, Vanessa Kiley, she put her fingers to the SPSS software. As in many parts of my story, I remember the night. I remember the night when I got invited to that open house. I remember the night when I walked into Vanessa's office, and she said, I have the results. I've played with the numbers. I have the results. I was wide-eyed and really interested.
Yeah.
Here's what she said. Nothing. There's no statistical correlation of any kind between personality, natural ability, and leadership performance. And it sounds like a sad report, but I was kind of glad, because our clients were asking us, like, we get up on the mountain and they would say, what's the magic mix? And at least I could say now, you know what? We actually ran the numbers, and there's no magic mix. And I got up to leave her office, kind of like, okay, well, we gave it a shot, and now we've got an answer. She said, but I did find something that we weren't looking for. So she kind of Columboed me on that one. She's like,
yeah, no kidding. Oh, by the way, right?
Yes, exactly. Oh, by the way. So I turned around. I'm like, well, what? And she, in her desperation to find something, finally said to the software, forget about all of any hypothesis we have. In fact, software, SPSS, I'm not going to tell you where to look. I'm just going to give you all the data. And you tell me if there's a statistical correlation anywhere in any of this data. And that's when we found it. So the data came back and said, you can ignore personality. There's no correlation there. You can ignore these natural abilities, but you're measuring 8 areas of leadership. And just think about a pizza. You cut a pizza, normally round pizza, you have 8 equal slices. We didn't even realize the assumption that we were making is that all 8 of those aspects of leadership were equally important.
Wow.
Turns out they're not. And that's what we didn't know. So while she is in desperation, say, please find something, the software came back and said, you're measuring 8 aspects of leadership. And eventually, through a couple of iterations of the data, what it said back to her is there are 2 aspects of leadership that are driving 77% of the variability on this assessment. In other words, there's 2 that are more important than the other 6 combined.
Yeah.
And so then we're like, whoa, what is going on here? We weren't looking for that. We didn't expect that. And of course, that gets us to the question of which 2. So maybe for fun, what would you say if I don't tell you which 2, but I tell you which 8 and people get to pick which 2 they think it is? What do you think about that?
That's a great idea.
All right. So I'm going to read all 8. Here are the,
go ahead.
Here are the 8 areas. So set direction, think strategically, align resources, motivate and inspire, others focused, execute and follow through, inwardly sound, and develop talent. So those are the 8. But 2 of them.
So I'm going to pick motivate and inspire and connect.
Motivate and inspire. And what was the other one?
Connect.
Well, we didn't have connect in those words. Maybe.
What was the one?
Go ahead.
Well, there was develop talent.
Yeah.
But there was another one.
There was execute and follow through. There was set direction and think strategically. There was align research. There was others focused.
Others focused.
Okay. So motivate and inspire and others focused. So let's talk about motivate and inspire.
Okay.
Congratulations, Mike Litton. You, in choosing motivate and inspire, have chosen the most popular answer to this question. The most popular. And it makes total sense because everybody seems to understand that we've got to have energy to get things done.
Yeah.
We don't have any gas in the tank or wind in the sails or whatever other transportation analogy you want to use.
Yeah.
If we don't have that energy, nothing happens. It is a completely logical guess. It is the number one guess, and it is not one of the 2.
Wow.
It's not one of the 2. And the reason that it's not one of the 2 is because I think we don't totally understand what motivates. Wow. So we get that the motivation's got to be there, but we're missing the precursor to what actually creates that motivation. So the 2 that made up 77% of the variability on that assessment, and put another way, I say make up 77% of leadership, are others focused, which you picked, and inwardly sound. Others focused and inwardly sound. Now, if you put those 2 together, we're going to put those over here to the side.
Yeah.
I want us to think about the other 6. I'm going to read back through those.
Right.
Set direction, think strategically, align resources, motivate and inspire, execute and follow through, and develop talent. Those are important things in leadership.
Yeah,
so hear me. If I'm on the other side listening to this, are you going to tell me those things don't matter, Tim? No, I'm going to tell you they matter a whole lot. But when you look at that list, that is what leaders do.
Yeah.
When you look at the other 2,
who they are.
You look at you got it.
Yeah,
when you look at inwardly sound and others focus, that's who the leader is as a person. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that this little thing that you just put together in the last 2 minutes took me 3 years because we had all the data.
Yeah.
But I just didn't see it. My colleagues, we didn't see it that way. One day, again, I have all these moments in my life. I remember day when I was in my office, and by the way, Mike Kane was down the hallway. I had left the consulting firm. He had gone off to another company, and I
Yeah.
had followed him
Yeah.
because I wanted to follow a great leader. So
Yeah.
I had followed him there. I went racing down the hallway. Well, the day I'm like, oh my goodness, wait, these two are who, and these six are what? And if we were going to round, I could say 77% because I'm an engineer, But if you want to round it, you could just say 3/4
Yeah.
of our effectiveness as leaders comes from who you are, not what you do. And that's the bottom line. That's the who, not what principle. And I think it's really important to emphasize with everybody that I'm not an inventor. Sometimes I'll end up on a podcast and the person, we're going to talk with Tim Spiker about the latest trends in leadership. I'm like, no, you're not. We're not talking about, this isn't a trend.
Yeah.
This has always been true.
Yeah.
It
It's
is
not the
true.
trend. It's what it literally is.
It's
Yeah.
because we're talking about the human condition.
Yeah.
We're not talking about something that's 2025 specific. And, I can say that with such confidence for multiple reasons. One is there's other people that have done research that use different language, but found the same results.
Yeah.
And we found
True.
those and cited those. I've talked with some of those people. And so there's more than just our data. And also that data that I'm talking about, it's global.
Yeah.
It cuts across every industry, every level of leadership, every culture around the world.
Mhm.
Also, anecdotally, I've been in those rooms. Back to that, I got blessed to be on those international development opportunities,
Mhm.
leadership development opportunities early on. And I've been in a room where the translator's next to the person. He's Chinese in this case, and he's talking about things that are somewhat counter to Chinese culture,
Mhm.
but perfectly aligned with who, not what. And he's describing the best leader that he's ever followed. So even when people have to go against cultural norms to describe the best leaders they've ever followed, they end up talking about things that fall into these buckets of inwardly sound and others focused. And so those two things, and this is the connection point, those two things make all of the things that what a leader does, it makes those things matter more.
Yeah.
When we are driving for results and we're not inwardly sound and others focused, it doesn't produce as much motivation. It doesn't produce as much execution. It doesn't even produce as good a strategy because my insecurity and my ego keeps us from looking at all the strategic possibilities that we should. So the analogy for this is a tree. Imagine you're driving down the highway. Sun is setting. I've probably spent enough of my years in the Midwest. It's always some little knoll in the Midwest where it's probably 98 degrees in the summer and the sun is setting behind this beautiful oak tree that they left in the median when they built the highway.
Mm-hmm.
As I get closer and closer and the tree gets more and more impressive, and I finally get right up next to it, there it is in all of its glory. And I think to myself, gosh, I bet it has an incredible root system.
Mm-hmm.
Said nobody ever. Nobody's
Yeah.
ever looked at that and thought the roots are incredible. We just see the above ground stuff. And this is why this work is so important and so hard, because we see the things that leaders do, but we don't think about the root system that's causing that what of leadership to really be its most effective. And that is inwardly sound and others focused. So the who is the roots below ground, the what of leadership that is so incredibly important. Those are the things that we see.
Yeah.
And they are deeply funded. They are deeply funded by leaders who are inwardly sound and others focused. So that's the thumbnail sketch of the research.
That is so freaking cool. And Scott Mann talks about that in the iceberg thing.
Yes.
When he talks about the human operating system.
That's right. Yeah.
It's wow. I just love that, man. That is so unbelievably cool. That is so cool. So you write the book. The book now has also a discussion guide.
Yes, it does.
Talk about that for a second, because I downloaded it, by the way.
Thank you. I'm glad you got it. I know what you did. What you did is you gave us your email and
yes,
then
I
you
did.
a free discussion guide.
Yes, I did. My name and my email.
Yes, very good. That's right. Thank you. So we really just wanted to, for folks who wanted to have a little guidance. Also, I mentioned we learn so much from our clients, and to be in peer conversations, or even Tim Elmore talks about a new kind of diversity. He talks about generational diversity in business, which is I've got me, I've got somebody who's 10 years ahead of me, I got 10 years behind me.
Right.
What an incredible conversation that is when we dig into that. But the idea is to be in dialogue about it. I'm not really interested in people just agreeing with me. I'm more than happy to hear, hey, I don't know if that applies in this case, and we'll talk about it. And that those are always interesting conversations. But we wanted to give people who say they wanted to go through the book in a systematic way with a few other people, that we wanted to create a discussion guide to help them along the way with that. So
Yeah, and I think that's really your magic power, like your superpower, is that you're constantly staying in curiosity. You're constantly looking at the data. You're constantly looking at how you can help, right? And you're taking in all of this data, you're taking in all of this research, and then you're coming back and saying, okay, now how do we apply it to leadership? How do we
well,
take you to the place, right? How can we get you to the place where you need to be an effective leader?
one
And
of the things
that's
I've found is that we get a
incredible.
chance to interact with some really smart people.
Yeah.
And while we might create foundation and structure, they've got to fill in all the color. They
Yeah.
know that problem employee that they're I
Mhm.
don't know that person. They know
Yeah.
that person. They know the dynamics in their industry. I mean, you can explain it to me and I'll understand it, but I'll never have your knowledge. You're doing
Yeah.
it every single day. And so what we're able to do is we're able to work with individuals and organizations where we'll say, hey, you know what? I don't know anything about manufacturing car parts.
Mhm.
But you tell me, here's what great curiosity looks like. What does it look
Yeah.
like in your job? Or how does that show up? Or empathy? Or if we dig over into the inwardly sound side of time, where are the biggest challenges to being a leader of principle in what you do day in and day out? And we just ask them and invite them and probably require them at some level to contextualize all the things that we're talking about
Yeah.
for their environment.
Right.
So here are the principles that we have all the research behind. We're going to apply those, but you're going to apply those, and we're going to have a dialogue about it. And inevitably, I get to learn more about a lot of different industries. We get to hear all the nuances between these companies. It's so it's so crazy that this past week I got this beautiful wood carving in the mail that
Mhm.
I was not expecting, and I open it up. It has a quote from me that I wrote in the book. So it's just a little bit like a weird world where you're like, wait a second, somebody sent me my own quote. Like,
Right.
do I hang it up or do I hide it in the drawer? I don't know what to
Right.
do with it. But it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm not gonna put it in the drawer. But here's the fun and funny part of that. That person felt really moved to do that special thing for me, which meant the world to me. And the quote that's on the board is not from me. I wrote it quoting somebody else who
Wow.
was engaging with this. And I
Wow.
think so I was working with somebody around being others focused, and
Mhm.
we'll just share what the quote is. So I'm not trying to be coy about it,
Yeah.
but as we were working on being more others focused, because it's part of these two foundational pieces, it's the roots.
Sure.
I was going on and on about the business case, which I will do from time to time, even though I know that there's non-business cases to make.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about how it's going to impact his leadership. And I just said, look, it's just a better way to lead. And he said to me, it's not just a better way to lead, it's a better way to live.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I will give you attribution, but I am putting that in the I'm putting that in the book. So that just points out to me. I mean, I think working in the consulting space is the greatest racket in the history of planet Earth, because all of our clients expect us to mine the very best things that they give to us. We regurgitate it anonymously, but we
Mhm.
still share it back, and they expect us to do that. Like,
Yeah.
we're not doing our job if we don't do that. And I get to go to the next client and we get to learn more, put that into the pantheon of all the things that we get to share, make it a little bit better, and share it with the next client. How is this legal? This
Yeah.
shouldn't even be legal, but it's so much fun to get a chance to share with people. Here's what the research says, but now you tell me,
Mhm.
what does this look like? You can go from the executive suite to the front line. What
Mhm.
does it look like on the night shift on Wednesday?
Mhm.
Tell me what that curiosity or that empathy looks like on the night shift on Wednesday. Or walking into the CEO's office, who's dealing with the board and shareholders, and saying, tell me what that looks like. Tell me what curiosity and empathy look like at the investor meeting on Friday.
Mhm.
and then we're going to talk about it. The principles apply at all levels of leadership. And that's because we're dealing with the human condition. So I could go on and on with stories.
I love this, man. I
I'm so
absolutely love it.
appreciative of our clients, Mike. I mean, we learn so much from our clients. I can't even put it into words.
Yeah, that is so cool. And we're so appreciative of you. You can't even believe it. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. The name of the book is The Only Leaders Worth Following. And Tim Spiker is the author. Tim, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a part of our podcast. I'd love to be on your podcast if you'd like, and I'm looking forward to
I know a guy.
long,
I could
long
probably talk to a
relationship.
guy. See
You
if I
know
can
a
make
guy?
an arrangement. Yeah, probably. I know a guy.
You got a connection?
That sounds great. That
Thanks,
sounds
buddy.
great.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.